Hi, I'm Shuichi Murakami. Welcome to the new series, Designing Landscape Form. Through the last series, we learned the basics of seeing and drawing landscape forms. We will shift our focus from grasping form to creating form. The first episode is Let's Design Visually Dynamic Landscape Forms. Even when nothing is physically moving, certain shapes and balances can give us the feeling of force and motion. In this episode, we will learn how to design those kinds of forms. What do we mean by dynamic shapes? First, look at this square. You probably don't feel any sense of movement in it. Now look at this rectangle. It feels as if it is stretching upward and downward. And this rectangle, it feels like it is extending sideways. In this way, even in a still image, some shapes give us the impression of movement in a particular direction. These are what we call dynamic shapes. Next, let's look at combinations of shapes. First, take a look at this set of shapes. The left and right shapes are the same, and it feels stable. Now look at these other sets. On the right, it seems to stretch up and down, while on the left it seems to stretch sideways. You can sense forces and movements in different directions, even though the shapes themselves are not moving. This contrast creates a sense of tension. That's what we call dynamic balance. So far, we have studied dynamic balance in two-dimensional space, but what about the three-dimensional space? Here you see a perspective drawing of a three-dimensional space made of three identical rectangular blocks. It is drawn in one-point perspective. The horizontal line represents the eye level assumed to extend infinitely into the distance. Imagine taking the two rectangles we looked at earlier, turning them into flat rectangular blocks and placing them so we are viewing them from the front. Then, the horizontal block was moved back and shifted to the left. On top of that, another block of the same shape was added, placed as if it is floating from front to back in the air. In two-dimensional space, we saw that dynamic balance can be observed in the vertical and horizontal directions. Here, in three-dimensional space, depth has been added. Now you can feel forces and movements in three directions, up and down, side to side, and front to back, creating a sense of tension between the elements. Let's explore 3D dynamic balance with more elements. Take a look at this perspective drawing. The tall vertical wall in the front remains as it is, but the long horizontal wall in the back has been extended to the left. The canopy, which originally stretched into the depths, has been rotated to extend sideways, reaching out to the right opposite the horizontal wall. In the place where the canopy once was, a row of columns extending into the distance was added. On the opposite side of the left columns, a sequence of square floor planes was placed, also extending into the depths. By intentionally shaping and orienting these forms in the vertical, horizontal, and depth directions, and by composing them together, you can design dynamic forms of landscape. Here is an important point when designing dynamic forms of landscape. This is also a vertical rectangle, but because its width and height are nearly the same, it does not strongly suggest an upward or downward direction. The same applies to a horizontal one. When its width and height are almost the same, it does not convey much of the horizontal direction either. This also happens when you combine two rectangles. If both have proportions where the width and height are nearly equal, you hardly feel any sense of tension. So, to create dynamic balance, the distinctive proportions of the elements are crucial. To deepen your understanding further, I recommend reading the following book, Rudolf Arnheim's Art and Visual Perception, A Psychology of the Creative Eye. In this book, you can explore in greater depth the psychological effects of visual elements, especially in relation to the concepts of dynamic form and balance that we studied here. Here is today's summary. By paying close attention to the three directions, vertical, horizontal, and depth, and deciding the shapes and positions of 3D elements accordingly, you can design dynamic forms of landscape. And here is a good next step. Try replacing these geometric volumes with real elements such as trees, structures, or pavements. This will help you connect abstract forms to the actual compositions that shape landscapes. In the next episode, we will focus on transforming two-dimensional shapes into three-dimensional compositions. Have you ever wanted to move beyond the simple placement of familiar elements and enrich your ability to imagine space? Here you will expand your vocabulary of spatial forms by learning how to turn 2D shapes into 3D compositions. See you in the next episode.